Would you say that you think the industry and overall, consumer product goods are moving in the right direction? Is there kind of a revolution occurring, or do you think we're still falling short and having some of the same problems we did in the past?
We're still falling short. The food industry is too powerful in the United States. There are a lot of things that need to change. And part of that's education. Part of it's like, you shouldn't be eating certain things. Also, part of it is that food is out there and people are going to choose it. And what can we do to make it better? 57% of an adult's diet in the United States right now is processed food, and it's 67% for children. And that's even worse.
Welcome back to Healing with Jace. I'm super excited to have this conversation today. And today, I'm really excited to welcome a remarkable guest, Rachel Gargano. Rachel is a highly accomplished nutrition expert with nearly 20 years of experience in the field. She holds a master's degree in nutrition, is a registered dietitian, and is a certified breastfeeding specialist, currently serving as a chief registered dietitian for Live It Up. Rachel's expertise spans plant-forward eating, sports nutrition, maternal and child health, and overall health and wellness. Her passion lies in empowering people to understand the intricate relationship between food, health, and disease, and to take micro steps every day toward becoming their best selves. From her early days working one-on-one with clients in private practice to her impactful role in the food industry, Rachel's work has influenced the countless individuals and communities, helping them lead healthier lives. Rachel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jace.
I'm really excited, as I said, for this. Nutrition is super important to me, especially after going through the battle I just did with cancer. So let's dive right into it. I want to start with what led you to this path in life, to doing what you do to help. Tell us, what inspired you to become a dietitian?
Oh man, it's been an interesting road. So initially I was a geology major, and then I got really sick. So I was in school in upstate New York, went over to Vermont, ate at a hole in the wall, and felt like I had food.
Food poisoning?
Thank you.
No problem.
So I felt like I had food poisoning, but then it started lasting longer than a week. So I said, got to go to the doctor. And they didn't know what it was. They were like, Rachel, this is Dientamoeba fragilis, but it says it's normally not pathogenic. So we're not sure what's happening. And it took a year. I lost 20 pounds. Oof. And what was happening was this flagellate in my intestines was eating all of my nutrition. So I would go to doctors and they would say, well, are you taking laxatives? Do you have an eating disorder? I was like, I want to eat, but I am not able to retain it. So I finally went to a specialist at Yale New Haven Hospital, and he was very surprised that I hadn't been traveling and got this. Apparently this is something that you get when you travel. So he was able to give me the right medication, and it went away. And during that time, it made me very interested in how the body and how food come together and how we react to it. At my college, we didn't have nutrition, so I went into exercise science.
Okay.
And then after that, I thought, I want more. So my master's in nutrition communications. Then I learned there was such thing as a dietitian, and I said, that's what I want. So I had to get another undergrad so that I could do the year-long internship, and that's how I got into nutrition.
Well, it's oftentimes the challenges we face that lead us into what we want to do. Food is a really interesting thing. People say food is medicine all the time. I'm guilty of it for a good reason. But you've been in it for so long. You've been in it for a majority of your life. How has your approach to nutrition evolved, would you say, over the past 20 years?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. So it has definitely evolved. When I was a fresh-faced dietitian, I was all about counting calories and just being really detail-oriented, I think, to the point where it wasn't as helpful. And also back then, it was kind of more like, oh, fat is bad and things have changed, So as I have come into myself as a dietitian and really understood people and their needs, and everyone is a little different, I make sure now that I'm kind of more moderate. I'm a moderate dietitian because people aren't ready for strict right away, and they need to ease into it. They need to understand that they can be successful. So I come into things, being really flexible and hoping that this flexible mindset, which most people don't have, they're all or nothing. They want to get it done, but then they fail and they're like, well, I can't do it, so I'm not going to try.
Right.
Got to ease people into it. So that's how things have changed the most for me.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I'm also an all or nothing person, but it's about the small wins and it's about building those habits. So it's actually nice to hear that you're doing it more in this encouraging way rather than, if you don't do this, it's not going to work at all. And not that people say that, but.
Oh, no, people say that.
Right. Probably. You've done a lot of work, I'm sure, private practice, one-to-one, but then you've eventually emerged into being a part of the food industry, which I think is great. I think more people should do that. What excites you about kind of utilizing your practice and having entered the food industry and using your expertise there?
What excites me the most is that my reach is bigger. As you mentioned before, I am able to touch more people with nutrition education. The other thing that I really enjoy is that I am working in different parts of the industry that I think make a difference. I would never go into a part of the industry that I didn't agree with. And I know that there's some dietitians who do that because they want to make a change, but it's a slow moving machine. And that change comes really difficult.
Right.
It just takes a long time. And so for me, I have chosen places that make the most sense. And for me to really get behind products and to know that they have worth in the nutrition field feels good and allows me to have more energy to put into that. And then to say, okay, well, it's not just about the product. What does this look like overall? How are we using it? And what does the rest of the diet look like? And I feel like my job isn't just to say, you should only be having this, because nothing is just about one. We have to have variety and being able to move forward and bring that to the masses makes me excited. Like, what does diet mean?
Right.
Diet's not always a bad word, but it can be a bad word. And what does that mean for each person?
Right. I think the being in the health and wellness CPG during my young life has shown me the whole world of what exists out there. Would you say that you think the industry and overall, consumer product goods are moving in a right direction? Is there kind of a revolution occurring, or do you think we're still falling short and having some of the same problems we did in the past?
We're still falling short. I think that there are some good steps being taken. I also think that the food industry is too powerful in the United States, and that there are a lot of things that need to change for the American diet to be better. And part of that's education. Part of it's like, you shouldn't be eating certain things, but also part of it is that food is out there and people are going to choose it. And what can we do to make it better? What can we do to make it so that it's not always going to be a negative? If we look at it, 57% of an adult's diet in the United States right now is processed food, and it's 67% for children, and that's even worse. So it's about education, and it's about having more influence over the food industry as a whole to make positive change versus them having more power over us.
Certainly. I don't know. I know there's kind of multiple takes on this. I'm somebody who's worked a lot with erythritol over the years, which, say what you will about it, is an alternative to added sugar, which is great. The thing I've seen that's a problem is, and this is a bit of maybe a conspiracy theory, so take my word lightly, but it seems as though Big Sugar likes to put out, hit pieces on some of these plant-based sweeteners. They don't want to take up that market. And again, that's a theory. It's not fact. We don't know. And there are certainly bad sources of certain ingredients. But when you look at the ingredients that are used in these products, are they something that you could say, this will accomplish somebody being able to eat healthier? Or does somebody need to stick to only eating whole foods? So it's whole foods versus, can I buy enough at the store that I can eat a healthy life?
Enough at the store as in like processed foods?
Yeah, like,
Is that where we're
yes.
going?
Can I achieve being healthy, eating things off of the shelves? Or do I only need to eat things out of the ground, or, I caught myself?
Sure. Like I mentioned before, I am very moderate and I
Right.
want to meet people where they are. And there's a large range of foods at the grocery store that can be eaten and that I think are good. The fruits and vegetables there. I mean, these are critical to health. Having plenty of produce is so important. There are some, whole proteins that you can get. When we're looking at processed foods, there's a range. Cut vegetables ready to be sauteed, that's processed. Cutting is processing. So minimally processed foods, I think, can still make their way into the diet. Frozen vegetables that have nothing added to them. They're normally frozen straight out of the field, so they've retained more nutrition than something that has been sitting there for a long time, because freezing stops degradation of vitamins and minerals. So that can be an option. When we get into more highly processed foods, there are some aisles in the grocery store that aren't great to take a walk down, and that should probably be avoided. But again, if I'm talking to someone and all they've known is processed foods, we have to start small. We have to say, what is a better step for you? Instead of having this cereal that has all these artificial colors and artificial sweeteners and like no nutrition, is there a different cereal that is less processed? Grape nuts has like 4 ingredients, you
Right.
know?
Sure.
It will break your teeth, but it might be a better option than Lucky Charms, And that's the first step. Let's take a step within the category, and then we can step out of it once the person has enough confidence and go into more whole foods.
I like your approach. Again, going back to the slow entry as opposed to all or nothing. A lot of people are deterred because they hear a lot of, misconceptions in the world of nutrition. Are there any common misconceptions that you've heard in your practice that you wish people understood better?
There are so many.
There's any. Give me any.
Well, I mean, the whole fat thing.
Okay.
Fat used to be, listen, for my generation and for the older generation, fat was bad, right? You don't want fat. And everything was low fat, which means there was, it was all carb. It was all sugar. And so there was a big swing, and there is still those hanger-oners of it has to be low fat, and it doesn't have to. You have to choose the right fats.
Right.
And you still don't, you still have to be aware of what is in there. But that's one thing. And this might be something that I don't know how a lot of people feel about, but there is not enough research behind seed oils being bad for me to say avoid seed oils. It's not there yet for me. It might get there, and then eventually I might be like, avoid seed oils. Right now, though, there is still beneficial studies out there showing that they have the mono unsaturated fats and polyunsaturated that are beneficial. And I haven't seen evidence to convince me yet that people should avoid those. And that's a big one out there right now.
It's what I like to say all the time is not all ingredients are created equal. When you broadly generalize an entire group of an ingredient, you can have cases where there is something that's actually okay for you. It just depends on where it's sourced. Finding where it's sourced is a little bit harder, but that's where the education is important. And on that note, for people going out and searching for balanced nutrition education, where would you recommend people to look? Or should people come to you or, another nutritionist? Where should people go to get the good source?
Well, a registered dietitian is definitely if you're looking for individual guidance, or if you're looking at information on the web, you want to make sure you are going to the right nutrition experts. A nutritionist might be good and they might have good information, but not all of them have the same education. So a nutritionist, someone can call them themselves a nutritionist if they have gone to school and had like one class over a weekend or over 6 weeks. They can then call themselves a nutritionist. A dietitian has to have a master's plus an undergraduate in nutrition plus a year-long internship plus take a national test plus maintain their CEUs, their continuing education. And different specialties have maybe a test every 5 years that they have to take. So it's really important to know where it's coming from. Now, that's not to say, like I said, all nutritionists are bad. There are some that are certified nutritionists who have gone through more, who have masters. I think where it's difficult is there's a lot of information on social media that's just kind of thrown around, and people will look at studies and just pull one fact from it, and then everything else is negated. And what they are then saying doesn't make sense, but they're pulling it out because it's like explosive. And they're saying this is truth when in fact it's not. That's when we run into trouble. So it is about who you're getting your information from, and then just kind of double checking, like doing your own digging and making sure that is the research there.
Yeah, certainly. I'm guilty of scrolling of a video and, hey, you should eat this in the morning. And I blindly believe it. I go, this video looks good. It looks right. And it might not be what works for me. We were talking a little bit earlier about there's no such thing as a one size fits all. So within your approach, do you actually look person to person and maybe recommend different things for different people? Or do you kind of have a blanket that works for most people?
Everyone is different. While we kind of strive toward the same goals, lots of produce, enough protein, mostly whole foods, getting enough of the right fats, complex carbohydrates coming from the right places. Yeah, that's the ultimate goal for everyone, but everyone's journey to get there is going to be different and might include different things. And if someone has some sort of chronic disease, that will also change what types of foods are recommended. And so it's always an individual approach. And that's also why diets are sometimes a bad word. It has the word die in it. And sometimes they don't work because they're not one size fits all, but they try to make themselves feel like they are.
Right.
A one size fits all.
You mentioned kind of disease, chronic illness, and going through my journey, I've learned a lot about how food plays a role in terms of healing our bodies, preventing certain things up to a certain point, of course, in some cases in a great deal, but that's up to everyone's opinion. What are your thoughts on the role that food plays in disease management or prevention?
Huge. It's huge. What we put in our mouths can turn on and off different genes. It plays a role. Nutrigenomics is the study of how food affects our genes. And while we can't change some of them, we can make a big impact. We can turn on genes for different chronic diseases if we're eating certain foods. That also means that we don't turn them on when we don't eat those foods. And like you said, you can't always prevent, but you can make a huge impact on your health by what you put in your mouth, because I truly believe that we are what we eat, and we exude mentally and physically what we eat.
Certainly, it makes sense. I like to say, stack the odds. You can stack the odds in your favor the best you can. The more you do that, the better off you can be. Doesn't mean it'll guarantee work, but the odds might be more in your favor than before. Are there a set of foods or anything that you believe in and say, people should be eating these no matter what? Maybe it's a variety. For example, I always tell everyone to eat blueberries because they're rich in antioxidants. Do you have any of those?
I say all fruits and vegetables.
All fruits and vegetables. Fair enough.
You know what? Berries, very high in antioxidants, all of them. They are little powerhouses. They're fabulous. And getting frozen berries, cheaper, and also just as good. They last longer. But we can't just eat one food and get all the benefits. Every color of fruit and vegetable contains a different array of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, phytocompounds. So if someone comes to me and says, I eat kale every day, and they're like, I eat kale every day. And I'm like, good for you. I'm glad that you are. But did you know that eating kale every day isn't covering your nutrition needs? Our bodies are so intricate, and every single function and reaction in the body takes vitamins and minerals. So if we aren't getting that from food, like if someone is only eating processed foods, only eating out at fast food, they might be maintaining their weight and they think, oh, I'm fine. But they can't see what's happening in their body. They're not getting other nutrients from that. They are only getting those calories. And sometimes it's detrimental calories. So making sure that people understand that it's the variety, that's the spice of life and of their health. And that's critical. But I agree, blueberries are very good for you.
They're so good.
They're delicious.
They're my favorite. If somebody approaches you and they want to begin working with you, what does that process look like? It might kind of relieve some people's anxiety around it.
Yeah. So working with a dietitian, it's like working with a therapist because food is so personal. You really have to jive with your dietitian. So you want to reach out to a few and you want to feel them out. You know, when you talk to someone, if they're going to be a good person for you or if they're not.
Right.
And you really want to feel that out. So I definitely recommend that when someone is ready to make that step, to know that there is someone out there for them. And you might just have to call a few different people to find that right person. I like to tell people that, I have divorced clients in the past. Because I think we didn't really jive, but they just wanted to keep going. And I was like, I will support you in whatever capacity I can. But you can't make change like that. And I wanted to release this person to make sure that they could make the change they want to make because they weren't finding that with me. And I need people to understand that it's okay to stop if you're not finding it, but don't stop forever. Go to someone else. And make sure that you are comfortable with them because it's all about food is a Band-Aid for everything that happens in life. And we use it emotionally. And so if you don't have an emotional connection with the person you're talking to about food or you don't feel comfortable with them, then it's very unlikely that you will be able to make that progress that you're looking for.
You mentioned food being a Band-Aid with emotion. I actually think that's really interesting. Could you talk more about that? What does food being a Band-Aid for emotion mean?
Food is just, it is wrapped up in everything we do in our society, right? We celebrate with food. We commiserate with food. We have to eat to live. It's not like a drug. We can't cut it out, right? It doesn't work. And because of this, and because also society and advertisement has told us that, oh, you're feeling sad, you should eat some chocolate, or, you deserve this, we are now linking food with emotions when it shouldn't be. Food should be neutral. Food is something that we use for fuel. We can also enjoy it, but not to the point where it is then linked with emotions that shouldn't be linked to it, like boredom or sadness. Because then it gets to the point where we can't control our emotions unless we're eating a certain food. And this strong link actually has a lot to do with the chemical reaction in the body. So food affects our reward system, especially, sugar. It actually increases the natural opioids in the brain, dopamine. And that makes you want more of that specific food because your brain goes, that felt so good. Couldn't we do that again? And the interesting thing is you get used to a certain amount of dopamine. So you're like, I need 2 of those now. So let me eat 2 of those. And then this is a debate in the nutrition world, but I truly believe that some people can be addicted to food because of this chemical reaction in the body. And for some people, it's much harder to make changes with food because of this, but not impossible. We can retrain the brain to be okay on less dopamine, and it actually makes you like healthier foods more. It's really amazing. So that's what I mean when I talk about food being a Band-Aid. We use it for so many reasons that we don't really need to, and we don't utilize other strategies to help deal with our emotions. We just say, I'm just going to eat it. I'm just going to eat my emotions right now. And it's not good for our health.
No. I was shocked when I was going through cancer treatment. There was certainly discussion around food, but it wasn't as prioritized as I thought it would be. It wasn't necessarily a avoid this, avoid that. And I understand to some degree why. I mean, when you're doing that fight, you need energy. And oftentimes the choice is to eat or not to eat. You should eat, even if it is something unhealthy. And everybody has their own opinion on that, but I understand why. But yes, certainly emotionally, there were comfort foods and there were things I wanted to drift to. So that makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I was an oncology dietitian when I first got started.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I started it was like the first couple years of my dietitianhood. But you're right, it was really hard. And it was often more symptom management. And then it was also difficult because it wasn't always a priority with the doctors. So when we would come in, they would want us to focus on certain things. And I wanted it to be more and to help set people up for success, especially after. But we were never given that opportunity. So I agree with you. I wish it were more of that conversation because it should be.
With your work in nutritional oncology, were there certain diets or foods that you recommended to people?
You know, I worked with people when they were pretty sick. So it was like the symptom management.
Sure.
But, you know, as long as they were past a lot of their treatments, I would always encourage lots of fruits and vegetables. If it was during treatment, like I said, it had to do more about like, okay, you don't have taste right now. What can add more? Or you don't have an appetite. How can we deal with that? Or you're trying to work through nausea. Here are some foods that can be a little less nausea provoking.
Was it ginger?
Ginger, lemon, sniffing lemon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I had a lot of ginger.
Honestly, and this is a funny one, but for some people, chips
Really?
helped with their nausea.
Like
Just
chips.
having a couple chips. Like it just was really helpful for them.
I did find sometimes my nausea was induced by just having nothing in my stomach.
Yes.
And you don't realize that, and you're kind of feeling nauseous, and you're like, I couldn't eat anything right now, but
Yeah.
you get something in there and it actually fixes right up. That's really interesting. In terms of somebody who is at home and they're wondering, maybe I have an issue with food to some way, shape, or form, my diet, my relationship to it. Is there any sort of self-assessment somebody could do if they're listening to this right now where they can figure out if they need to see a nutritionist?
Yeah. I mean, everyone has room to improve their diet. But to really take a look at it is to keep a food log of everything you eat and drink. And it's tedious, and it's not something that I like to have people do too often. But I think it's really critical because it can pinpoint the struggle areas, the challenge areas. And as long as you aren't lying to yourself and like not writing down things that you don't want to write down, it can be a really great first step to say, okay, here are the places I need to look. Now, if we're thinking, most people know when their diet's not up to snuff. Most people also know how they're supposed to be eating, but they don't. It's more about that accountability partner. That's what a lot of dietitians are, an accountability partner and honing, you know, like, oh, you aren't getting this nutrient from your diet assessment. Let's figure out how we can get more of that into your diet.
Right. Certainly. What is your take on plant-based eating?
I love it.
Are you all about it?
I think it works for a lot of people. I think it doesn't work for everyone. I like plant-based eating. I think that plants are plentiful when it comes to the kind of nutrients we need, and that we're not getting a lot of phyto compounds that are so beneficial for us. A lot of people aren't. I mean, it's 1 in 10 people actually get the amount of vegetables they're supposed to eat in a day. And that makes me sad because there are so many benefits to plants. Now, I don't think everyone has to be vegetarian or vegan. I think that there is room for flexibility within that and to, include more plants because most people just don't have a lot in their diet. And there's just so much that they can offer. But as I always say, it's an individual journey. We have to figure out what works best for your body.
Right. And that might be the answer to this next question, but I always get wrapped up in what are the fad diets right now, and those change so much over time. You have people say this is what works, and like you said, everything works differently for everybody. But what are your thoughts on the more recent and more popular keto diet?
Keto has a lot of studies behind it showing a lot of benefits. It's also a very difficult diet to follow, and to get those benefits, sometimes you have to be pretty strict because it requires less than 10% of your calories to come from carbohydrate, which is like less than 50 grams. That is not a lot. That's like 2 apples,
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really intense, but it has shown a lot of benefit. There is also a lot to consider nutritionally. You are missing a lot of micronutrients when you follow something like that, because you're not getting as many plants. You get a lot of your B vitamins from whole grains, so you're not getting quite as many of those. So there are things to consider, and certainly that following it long term is incredibly difficult. So it's not for everyone. And then when people restart eating a normal diet, they gain weight really fast. Part of it is because for every gram of carbohydrate that we store it within 3 to 4 grams of water. But for every gram of protein or fat that we store it within 1 gram of water. So when we take away carbs, you lose so much water weight. And when you add them back in, you get it back.
Right.
And that's why when people go to that kind of diet, they're like, look at this weight loss. I was like, it's not always fat mass. It's a lot of water weight. And then when you try to re-enter a normal eating pattern, there's that bounce and then people get scared. That water weight's nothing to be scared of. And neither are carbohydrates. But for some people, the keto diet can be very successful, especially it's a lot of research on seizures and people who have who get seizures, they fall, especially children. It can prevent seizures. So it's really interesting.
I've definitely done a lot of digging into the keto diet, particularly because there's a lot of conversation going on around keto in relation to cancer treatment. A lot of clinical research ongoing and being done. There's certain people who have certain results. So definitely something to dig into that I've been digging into that is really interesting. If you're listening, I recommend you start researching about, but always, always, always talk to your doctor and nutritionist, of course. But it's exciting, and it only reinforces the food is medicine statement, that these diets can really help. We talked about plant-based, we talked about keto. How do you feel about the meat lovers of the world, the meat-based diets? Is there strength in that? Should it be isolated or just incorporated? What's your opinion?
Oh, I think it depends on how you do it. Because I think a lot of people who do that, they want to go the easy way. So they focus a lot on processed meats. And processed meats, we know, are a group 1 carcinogen. Mm-hmm. And the World Health Organization came out with a statement a few years ago saying, no, you really shouldn't have these in your diet. The research is that strong. So I think if it's done the wrong way, those diets cannot be a good thing. And that's not that, then it's not helpful. You might lose weight, but you don't know what's happening inside of your body until years later, right? And I think that's the problem with nutrition in general, is that we say these things will help you and people eat them. They're like, I don't see a difference. Well, you can't introspect. Like you can't really see all the processes happening with your genes. That takes years. And when normally people see me, it's when they've had a critical event that now they have to see a dietitian. So it's important to invest in your health early and not have to pay for it later.
Definitely. I thought of this the other day. I have so many friends in finance, and they're always talking about the effects of compound interest over time when you start investing little bits early on. And I thought to myself, why don't we do that with our health? Why is there not compound health interests? You start early and then you have the benefits later, but it's often the reverse. We punish our bodies brutally while we're young. Excessive drinking and eating candy and all this stuff. And then later on in life, we're wondering why we're punished for it. So
yeah. Well, and also our medical system does not really support the compound interest. It's very reactive. And so it's not about preventative, but if we can get there, I think it would be so good. Yeah.
I see the trends. People care. People are reading labels more than ever. I've never seen people pick up labels and read boxes more. And, there's apps out like the Yuka app. I don't know if you've heard of that one. You scan the barcode, it tells you the harmful ingredients. It's really exciting. There is all this about that we've talked in terms of what you eat. And then there's also this other world of people who choose to fast. I'm sure that falls into your realm a little bit. What are your thoughts on fasting?
There's also a lot of research showing that fasting is beneficial for our cells, and that when we fast, our cells are actually producing more beneficial, Brain fart.
Beneficial chemicals?
Could be. Yeah. Okay. Let me back up.
That's okay.
Okay. When we fast, it really, I totally lost that
It's okay.
whole thing.
We can go back to it.
No, we can talk about it. I just have to like change the way I'm talking about it because apparently I'm stuck on cells right now. I'm stuck on cells because they do produce something like, and I was just reading it the other day. I was like, oh, that's so fascinating. Like they're producing and I just can't remember. I'm just not there right now.
That's okay. Do you want to come back to it?
It's been a long 3 days.
Definitely. You're doing a lot of content right now.
No, I can go there. So fasting has a lot of research that is beneficial, that the fasted body changes in a way that is good for our health. Now, the way that you go about it might not be as healthy, but certainly intermittent fasting is a big thing right now. There is a way around that though. So, if someone has an 8-hour eating window, you can fit a lot of stuff in 8 hours, depending on how you're going. So if your goal is weight loss, it might not be as good, but a fasted state can happen overnight. As long as you're not grazing throughout the night, you come into a fasted state. What I recommend, especially because research is also showing that eating at nighttime is not good for our body. Our gastrointestinal tract wants to rest during that time. Its circadian rhythm is literally light and dark, just like our wake cycle. And every organ has a different circadian rhythm. But that one is definitely like, I don't want to digest food at night and I'm not going to assimilate it as well. I'm not going to digest as well. So night workers have difficulty maintaining their weight eating the same things. It also disrupts your gut microbiome to eat a lot at night. So if someone's doing intermittent fasting, studies are also showing that doing it an earlier window is even more beneficial. So I think that fasting is good, but you can have a regular diet and have that fasted state overnight and still get some of those benefits. You just have to say the kitchen is closed at a certain time.
Makes perfect sense. You mentioned the gut microbiome, a very hot word in the world today, or hot term, I should say. Give me a 101. What is the gut microbiome? What should I know about it? How does nutrition play a role?
Oh my gosh. So the gut microbiome, some scientists are calling the forgotten organ. There are between 30 and 300 trillion bacteria. It's not just bacteria, it's yeast, it's fungus, but most of them are beneficial. And in our gut, oh my gosh, we have a microbiome in our mouth. They're now theorizing we have one in our brain. They used to think it was sterile, but newer research is coming out showing that there could be a microbiome in there too, and that what we eat affects that as well. So in our gut, the good bacteria does a lot. It's not just there to help digest the things that we aren't able to, like fiber. It also extracts certain vitamins, vitamin K, certain B vitamins. You have to have healthy gut bacteria to get the most out of those vitamins. It also connects, so they're knowing now that there's the gut-brain axis. So all these little healthy flora in there talk to our brain via the central nervous system and can affect our mood, and our mood can affect our gut. So keeping that a healthy, thriving community is incredibly important. They're finding that it's just one of the main things to be concerned about now. So eating enough fiber, which is a prebiotics, feeds the good bacteria. Then they produce short-chain fatty acids, which are incredibly important fuel for our gut cells to maintain digestion and absorption. Also, enough short-chain fatty acids help to close the gaps between cells so that less harmful viruses can get through and cause immune responses. Eating probiotics can be helpful, but the problem is everyone's gut microbiome is different. Different probiotics might not work for everyone. Also, each probiotic works in a different way, so you can't just take any of them and think you're going to reduce your bloating because it's very specific what they are linked to. And there's also not enough research yet telling us which ones are good for what. Some of them we know. Some of them we know are beneficial, like for diarrhea or for bloating and constipation. Those have been studied pretty well, but there are so many that just research has to catch up. But our gut microbiome is so important to keep healthy.
So important. Exciting space to research about. A lot of research being done. A lot of people have started eating yogurt in a way they never have before because I've heard that's good for it.
It can be, but only if it says live active cultures on it.
Right.
Because there can be yogurt that doesn't have any.
That's just dessert, pretty much.
Just dessert.
Right. It's sugar and it's all that. In terms of the gut microbiome, a lot of people are looking at this and they're taking the dietary approach. But there's also this whole world of people who, whether it be for time reasons or they don't like certain foods, this world of supplementation.
Yeah.
Do you participate in supplementation with the people you work with yourself? What's your take there?
So some supplements I truly believe are not necessary, and some supplements, absolutely. And it's all individual.
Okay.
So depending on the person's goals and their current nutrition status, and if they have any chronic diseases, or, if they have taken certain medications, supplements can be important to help fill in gaps of where that person's nutrition is, or to get to a certain point of health. The other thing is that plants now don't have as much nutrition as they did a few decades ago. And that's from over-tilling the soil. So now the soil is depleted, so the plants can't get certain vitamins and minerals. It's also from too much CO2 in the air, which is affecting how plants can actually form vitamins and protein. Rice has less protein now, apparently, because of they're linking it to too much CO2 in the air. And so more people might actually need like a multi than they might think. Now, this isn't to say that plants don't have nutrition. They are still important, but we have to think about our health a little differently, because what we see out there might not contain what it used to.
I had the opportunity to sit and listen in on Dr. Zach Bush, who talks a lot about the issues with our soil currently. And so that's where the root of a lot of the nutrition problems stem from. It's where it's being grown, it's being turned over. And there's this huge issue with genetically modified ingredients and foods and plants. That's why the seed bank is important. I mean, we only have the genetic modified version at some points. So it is scary, but with that revolution we talked about occurring, hopefully we can get back to some of those older practices.
Yeah.
In terms of the future of nutrition and of food, where do you see us headed?
That's a big question.
It's a big question. There's a million answers, I'm sure. But is there anything that you're excited about that you see kind of approaching us in the world of nutrition?
I think, like you said, what really gets me going is that more people are interested in it. And I think that's important because for so long, we've just relied on the food industry to tell us what's what,
Right.
I was just talking about this earlier with someone else, and they were like, well, yeah, milk, strong bones. I was like, didn't they advertise well? Wasn't that great?
Right.
We all know, 3 glasses of milk,
Right.
milk mustache, but no, not necessarily. Like, that was really great advertising. Sure, calcium. You get calcium from so many places. So I think that when people are becoming more aware of their food intake and being more interested in learning about it, it will make such a big difference in terms of our health and our healthcare and hopefully insurance. And I really want to see those types of things start to make a change so that we can be a healthier society.
Yeah. Definitely. People want to learn. That's why some people are listening here, and it's why there's people like you doing the work that you're doing. For somebody that's listening and is feeling overwhelmed by the idea of improving their nutrition, what's one small step that they can take today?
There are so many small steps, and it will depend on the person as to which one they take. Micro habits, micro steps are incredibly important for building confidence in your ability to make that change. So I would say to someone, look at your diet. Do you feel like you have enough vegetables in it? And maybe you're just eating them once a week. So could you do 2 times a week? And I want it to be small. People will come to me and say, Rachel, I want every day I'm going to do it. And I was like, let's pull it back. Because are you going to do it every day? And if you don't do it every day, will you feel bad? And will that affect your motivation? So I think building small and strategic is really important because all these small things add up. And once you're doing it twice a week, jump to 4, So little things that you can do, I want you to look at your diet and say, what would make the biggest impact right now? Where would I get the most bang for my buck? What can I accomplish now? And don't just say, oh, I'm going to eat one more vegetable per week. You then have to write it down. You then have to plan it out. You have to make sure that your plan is visible so that you can execute. Because it's not just about thinking you're going to do it. It's about making that commitment. And that means like being accountable to yourself and putting it into play.
Definitely. I can thank my parents for the years of micro habits they instilled in me, reminding me to eat my vegetables at every meal. And although I didn't always love it, and I have a problem with cauliflower to this day, I've maintained it enough. In terms of the listeners that want to learn more about you and connect with you, how can they do so?
So they can find me at Live It Up Rachel for Instagram and TikTok. I also have a podcast called The Scoop Podcast on YouTube. And that's where they can find me. I also have a website, RG Nutrition and Wellness, and I'm the chief registered dietitian for Live It Up. So you can find me at letsliveitup.com.
That's awesome. We'll put links to everything in the notes of this. And my last question to you, kind of a big question also, but if you could leave people listening today with anything to take forward into their lives, what would it be?
Small change is significant. And that just because something feels daunting doesn't mean that it has to prevent you from moving forward. Think about it. Think about how you can make it less daunting. Don't think about, oh my gosh, I have to overhaul my entire diet. Think about that one change, small change. That's what I want them to take away. That they are just one small change away from starting to build that new foundation for their health.
Great. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on. I was so excited to talk to you and my excitement was justified. This was really great. I learned a lot and I'm excited to stay in touch.
Thanks for having me, Jace.
Awesome.